What is up, you guys? It's Monty, and I am back again once again with the start of another video. Today, I am finally here to do my January wrap-up. Now, I feel a little late to the party because I think at this point it's what, like January. It is February like 7th by the time you're watching this. I'm recording it earlier, obviously. I'm editing things. But it's a little late into the month for a January wrap up, in my opinion. Other girlies, they be putting it out when they want to put it out. To me, if it's not out like 2 days after the month is over, like, what are you even doing? But I wanted to make sure that the main channel was eating. If you're wondering where I've been, I have been over on Patreon. At this point, by the time you're watching this, I'll have had like 6 little daily vlogs. I'll throw up some thumbnails here. I'm doing daily vlogs over there for Blackathon. I don't usually push the Patreon, but I'm not gonna act like if you go join the Patreon, we're besties. That's not really how I be running things over there, but they do get exclusive reading vlogs, and I do weekly sprints at 4 Central on Fridays. Like, that's what I be doing. And then, like I said, in the month of February, they're getting daily vlogs of me reading for the Blackathon because I really wanted to do it. And so I said I'm going to do it. But I figured that if I put out daily vlogs in February on the main channel, they would flop. And so I didn't need floppage during Black History Month. So that's where I'm at over there. If you've been wondering what I've been up to, what I've been reading, what I've been planning to read, it's all over there. But let's talk about what I have read. Most of this, you guys already know, at least the broad strokes of things. I reviewed all of these things on Goodreads already, but not everyone follows me on Goodreads, which is also linked in the description. So let's get into it. The first thing that I read in the month of January was Yellowface. This is R.F. Kuang's adult literary debut. I think I have a standalone reading vlog for this, so I will leave my reading vlog for this book up in the cards. I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars. I think this is a book that definitely benefits from reading it all in one sitting, which I just talked about for a different book on Goodreads. But this book, I feel like you need to read in one sitting because the book wants you to. Like, it's actively pulling you deeper into Juniper's mind and how deranged she is, how like unhinged, wild. If you're like an unhinged character, you're going to love Juniper. Now, do I think you should love Juniper? No, because this woman, I said this in the vlog, but her and Letty are best friends. And yeah, I do recommend it. This book comes out. Let me just open it up because I have it on Goodreads. I have my Goodreads open just so I can remember everything that I can talk about. May 16th. This is a HarperCollins book, so like do with that what you will. The people are boycotting. By the time this video goes up, I don't know if the strike is going to be over. I kind of doubt it, but like maybe it is. In which case, hooray, go pre-order the book. But I don't know. It was a HarperCollins book. I read it. I loved it. Me and R.F. Kuang continue to be like this. And who would have thought? We're also coming up on my 1-year anniversary of reading an R.F. Kuang book because I picked up the Poppy War last Blackathon because I was a bad Black booktuber. But yeah, I picked it up last Blackathon, and here we are a year later, and I'm talking about her again. So that's how it is. Next, I picked up A Spindle Splintered by Alex E. Harrow. This is a novella. I'm not a novella girly, but I really enjoyed this book. Like, this just did something for me that I didn't expect it to do, and so I wound up being pleasantly surprised. This is a take on Sleeping Beauty, which I'm finding I like. I mean, we also do know that I like a good fairy tale retelling. I like when they're a little bit inventive. The things I've seen about this one, they usually complain about how modern it is because it is a Sleeping Beauty set on our real world. There are some fantastical elements towards the end of the book where magical thinking is kind of introduced, but it's set in our real world. There's a lot of pop cultural references. And here's my thing. I think that it's very strange when the girlies are upset about pop culture references being in books. They talk about how it dates a book, how it doesn't mean, like, it's not timeless anymore because people in our current reality are talking about these things. I think it's very weird to have a book, whether it's contemporary fantasy, urban fantasy, or just a regular, straight romance, straight contemporary women's fiction that is devoid of any kind of cultural markers. It's very strange to me, and I think it's very strange that the bookish community continues to advocate for the complete erasure of these pop culture landmarks, because most of the classics that we are reading today are very much steeped in the pop culture in which they were written in. They have those kind of cultural touch marks. Like, the reason there is an annotated William Shakespeare is because Shakespeare was sitting there writing in jokes of the day. He was in there giving people things that they would understand and relate to that we no longer relate to. You know what I mean? Like, the reason we have to go in and annotate it and have these explanations is because the people at the time that were going to see the play, they understood what he was saying. They understood the jokes and the references. And today we now need the landmark guide. And so I think it's very strange that the bookish community is always being like, I don't like this has too many pop cultural references, I don't like it this, it's going to age the book, it's not going to be timeless anymore. Whoever wants a story to exist in a vacuum is very strange, because it's not the absence of pop cultural landmarks that makes a book timeless, it's the story in which they are used. But to me, I did not mind the references in this particular book, and I don't really feel like there were that many. I enjoyed Alex E. Harrow's writing. Alex E. Harrow is currently blowing up because of the little Amazon Prime novella that they put out. I think it was like a November release, and it's like 30 pages. I haven't read it. I probably won't read it anytime soon. But I did enjoy A Spindle Splintered. I've heard even more negative things about A Mirror Mended. I think it was actually A Mirror Mended that people had more issues with than A Spindle Splintered, because A Spindle Splintered has like a 4-star average on Goodreads. So like, I couldn't have been hearing bad things about that. But for whatever reason, I really enjoyed this one. I will read A Mirror Mended at some point, just not in my immediate future. The next thing I read in the month of January was Someone Had to Do It. This is by Amber and Danielle Brown. Amber and Danielle Brown, they emailed, they sent a Twitter DM that I just kind of okay, I didn't miss it. So I got this email from them, and they were like, hey, we think you would really like our book. Can we send it to you? And by the time I saw this email, it had been sitting in my, like, I don't think it was in my spam folder, but it was in like my promotions folder, which might as well be a spam folder because Gmail is weird. But I got this email, and it was like a week or 2 weeks late, and the holiday season was right around the corner, and I was not going to try and ask these people to send me bookish mail in the middle of the holiday season. So I went to my library and I checked it out, and this is a fascinating story. They were correct in their emails. These authors were on the pulse of what Monty likes when they were asking me to read this book. So often I feel like I get the high fantasy girlies trying to get me to read their high fantasy book, and I dabble, but that's not me. And this, Someone Had to Do It, is a contemporary story. We are following our main character, Brandy, who is a black girl at this, she's an intern at this fashion house. She's kind of like bottom person on the hierarchy, and she's not really where she wants to be. But she has this well-to-do, he's like a college athlete, I want to say, but he is like, all the scouts are on him. This man is going to the NBA, like he's going to do big things in life. So they've been dating together. I think they had a meet cute at an airport before this story even began. And so her college boyfriend has an in with the daughter of the person who like runs the fashion house, like Brandy's boyfriend and like the daughter of the fashion house mogul man. They went to school together. So he arranged for them to meet up. And the daughter is like Taylor. Taylor has, typical, kind of stereotypical heiress syndrome, where she's not really being taken seriously. She's kind of like a ditzy, drug-addled person who's like maybe just got out of rehab, really just wants her inheritance. And now our main girl, Brandy, is in the center of some drama around the death of the fashion house mogul Simon Van Doren. I think that was his last name. And so now it's her and Taylor and everybody trying to figure out like how we're going to get out of this. And it was messy from beginning to end. Here's the thing. I think there are some gratuitous sex scenes in this book. They're just straight up gratuitous. But there's been some Twitter discourse around sex scenes. And I'm not trying to get into the puritanical Barbie brigade. So, like, I don't hate that there were gratuitous sex scenes in this book. I was just like, okay, girl, you're being accused of murder, and your boyfriend is a little bit of an idiot, so like maybe now's not the time to ride him like a pony, but you know what, go ahead and do it. And again, I had a really good time. I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. It was a very solid, thrilling ride. Is it a thriller? Not necessarily. Is it a mystery? Not necessarily. To me, it was giving soap opera in a book. It was soap opera in a book, which, you know what, that's kind of my brand. That's my bread and butter. So thank you to Amber and Danielle Brown. Whoever was in there emailing and sliding into DMs, you were correct. You were correct, because this was a hit. Next, I read The Davenports. The Davenports was my Patreon book for the month. Every month I give them a list of things. They get to vote. They voted for this book. And then I try and select books that I think have like a similar something in common with the book that they voted for, so they can get two books in a video, because there was a string of months there where I was just doing one book in a video, and sometimes a singular book in a reading vlog is kind of fun. It was kind of cute. It allowed me to like put things off a little bit more. But at the end of the day, I was like, is this really $3 worth of content? And I was feeling that it was not $3 worth of content. So they picked The Davenports, and I picked Someone Had to Do It and Nightcrawling to go alongside it. But The Davenports is a debut. It's out now. It came out January 31st. We're following four perspectives. It's a YA romance, and it leans very heavily on being a romance. I feel like I'm a contemporary girly in YA. Seeing these YA girlies doing romance tropes just wasn't really something that I was super invested in. All of the girls were hitting the same beats at the same time, and everybody there, we got, like I said, we got four perspectives. All of the people in the perspective have a love interest that they are supposed to be with by like society standards, and then the person that they really want to be with for love. And it's like everybody has the same dynamic, everybody has two love interests, everybody's hitting the same beats at the same time, doing the same things. It really didn't feel like we were having any kind of plot. It felt very muddled, and I feel like this is a duology just because it was too hard to pack everything in this one book. I feel like if Crystal Marquis had just done like two of the girls got to have their happily ever after here, and two of them got to have it in the next book, or like staggered some things, it could have worked out a little bit better. But overall, I felt this book is very shallow. I go into this more in the reading vlog, but it will be a duology. I also have to have like a little heart to heart with myself, because it was starting to give me a little bit of American Royals vibes, and I had to check myself, like, why do I not like this if I eat up American Royals every time? And I think what it really boiled down to is I felt like, at least in the beginning of the series, the characters all got to have lives outside of the romantic interests. And then as the series progressed into Majesty and into, Majesty and then Rivals, we got to see certain characters like Beatrice, like her love life was no longer her central arc. Like it was no longer her biggest thing. And so not everybody in the story was doing the same thing. And I feel like for this series, The Davenports, everybody has the same, like, it's just too much of the same thing. And it just felt very flat and very shallow. And it wasn't ultimately for me, but maybe y'all will enjoy it. Pick it up for yourself and find out. Then I read Anastasia by Sophie Lark. I picked up this book originally because I really wanted to do a reading vlog for it. But then my hold didn't come in until like the tail end of December, the beginning of January. At that point, all of the romance girlies had talked about the book. They had expressed their discussions about it. And I just kind of felt like there wasn't really a need for me to voice my opinions on this book. I don't think anybody was tuning into my channel to hear me talk about Sophie Lark historical romance debut. And so I just kind of just read it for myself. And I ultimately gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. Here's the thing. I'm very hesitant to say that people should pick up a book about a real life individual and be like, we're just going to fictionalize everything about this and like do these kinds of a thing. Specifically when I went into this book thinking it was going to be a fantasy romance, and it made me a little bit uncomfortable. Like, do I like the Fox animated movie Anastasia? Absolutely. But I recently, and I say recently, this is like 2018 or so, I think it's Nadine Brandis came out with an Anastasia book that was also fantasy romance, and it just made me a little bit uncomfortable to see the book executed that way. And it made me a little bit uncomfortable to think of like these people who had been brutally murdered. I mean, I understand like they were not good people. Like they were the czars of Russia. They was a different breed. Okay. So like, I'm not out here trying to cape for the monarchy or anything. But it was just like, it just made me a little uncomfortable, to be like, oh, these people who were brutally murdered because they had like fucked over their people for so long, and like the people were revolting, and now we're just going to do this thing where we're going to hand wave the story. And so I went into this book thinking that I was just going to be very uncomfortable following this book. And I went in knowing that we followed Anastasia from a young age. And I was like, I don't really know if I'm going to vibe with this. But ultimately, like I said, I gave it 4 out of 5 stars, but 4 out of 5 stars. You can tell that Sophie Lark really did a lot of research. And I think that the romance of this book is a complete afterthought. I think that if I had gone into this thinking it was really going to be more of a historical fantasy, I would have been a lot more interested, because I think, like I said, the romance, I think, only exists in this book because Sophie Lark is known for writing romance and people want her to write romance. And so if she hadn't written a romance, that I don't think her original fan base would have wanted to pick this up. It's also apparently going to be like the foundation for her next fantasy romance. It's going to be set closer to the modern day and is still going to use the same magic system, but it's going to be introducing other elements as well. And I think that as a foundational text for a further fantasy romance world, it's going to be good. Like, I would read them. I'm not a mafia girly just because I just can't get over the racism inherent in the mafia. Like, you're not going to do it. Just like I'm not going to be out here reading no motorcycle club romance because that's also just white supremacy repackaged. So like I'm not interested, but I will read some fantasy romance from Sophie Lark going forward. I think that she really handled the story of Anastasia with care, and I think that it did feel like I've seen a lot of, places where she's talked about how she really wanted to give Anastasia a life that she could have had. And do I think that the people of Russia really would have continued to embrace the czars? Absolutely not. I think that her life still would have included the monarchy going bye-bye and not her being empress of all Russia. But in the story that we get told here, I think it worked out really well. I think that, sure, you could argue like there's some punches that are pulled, but I think very early on in the book, the narrative introduces an element that if that element had not been executed upon later, it would have felt very lazy to think that it was even a possibility. So I recommend it to the girlies who want a historical fantasy, but just know that the romance of that book is like an afterthought. I think that the romance that she has with this man just doesn't even make sense, and is a little foolish. Then I read one of the worst books I've ever read, and that was Nightcrawling by Layla Motley. Here's the thing. I understand that Layla Motley is from Oakland, but the book that she wrote, it just felt very insensitive. It felt very exploitative in a way that I just was not prepared for. There's a scene that happens in this book that I'm just never going to get over. I also did not understand going into this book that it was going to deal so heavily with sexual assault perpetrated by police officers. Here's the thing. I watched We Own This City. I did a little research into the Baltimore Police Department. So like, I'm not going to be out here on the internet saying that police officers are great people who have never done anything wrong in their lives. Like, I understand that there is corruption that happens everywhere, particularly where people have outsized power over other people. I do believe that that's a breeding ground for just people taking advantage of said power. My issue with this is I don't think that the jacket does nothing to prepare you for this. Like, it talks about our main character being at the center of a police corruption scandal, but again, like, that corruption is her being gang raped by police officers, both in private, and there's a scene that happens in broad daylight just outside of a convenience store where she is sexually assaulted outside a convenience store. Like, it's just, there's nothing, was not prepared for any of that. It also just felt like it was a person who was down on her luck, and it was only something this bad and horrific could happen to somebody who comes from this kind of a living situation. It just felt like it was exploiting. It didn't feel like it was commenting on anything. It didn't feel like it was doing much of anything except peddling and tired and broke stereotypes, and just, it wasn't for me. It wasn't for me at all. I don't want to get into it. I went into it in the Patreon vlog, so like, pay your little $3, go watch it over there, but it was not for me. The next two things I did were poetry. So I listened to The Hill We Climb by Amanda Gorman because, I did watch, Mr. Joey Joe get inaugurated. And at the time, I was like, this is a really good poem. I had the poem from Libro FM, just the poem. They're just the poem. Because Penguin really wanted to get their money's worth. So they sold The Hill We Climb separately from the larger collection that came out a little bit later. So I'm not speaking for the whole collection. I'm literally just speaking for the single poem. And I just felt that it was not as good on its own. Like, I think it probably works better in that collection, or if I were to just like go back and watch her do it on the steps of the Capitol building. I should have just done that. But in the little audiobook that I had, there's an introduction from Oprah, and the introduction just felt like it was very tired. It was like written on a cocktail napkin. It was so short. Definitely did not need to be included. I don't know what Oprah's paycheck for that part of the book was, but like, a waste of money, truly, honestly. And then again, like, the performance in this little standalone piece just wasn't, I thought, as good. Then I also listened to Unraveling by Brandon Leake, who apparently won, according to the cover of his book, he won America's Got Talent. So like, I think it's just amazing that a poet was able to win America's Got Talent. I stopped watching America's Got Talent like 2 seconds after it premiered, so good for him. And this was a really solid collection of poems. I thought that it really handled race, gun violence, police brutality, all of those things really well. There is a poem about him being a basketball fan, and it becomes like a Kobe Bryant poem. It was very weird, definitely strange. I don't know if I would have included a Kobe Bryant poem the way that it was introduced here. Definitely think that we could have gone back to the drawing board on that one. But overall, it was a solid collection. I did bookmark several spots in the audiobook for me to go back and listen again. So if you have a couple of hours, go listen to him read his little poems. And the last book that I read in the month of January was Malice by Heather Walter. This is a reread. At some point at the beginning of the month, I just really wanted to listen to this book again. I was having a rough go of it. It was after the Davenports and night crawling that I was just feeling really low and I wanted a guaranteed knockout hit. And so I said, let me go back to Malice by Heather Walter. This is a Sleeping Beauty retelling, and I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars. It's great. I talked about this in my 2023 review of the book because obviously it's a reread. I read it first in 2021. I do have a vlog for it when I read it in 2021, but it was part of a choose your own adventure situation. So like, I don't think many people have even seen me talk about this book, honestly, but I've talked about it on live streams endlessly because I just love this retelling. Here we're following Alice, who was known as the Dark Grace. And I feel like a lot of people go into this book because it's a Sleeping Beauty retelling, because Alice is known as the Dark Grace. I think people expect Alice to be a Maleficent analog, and that's just really not who she is. Alice is an entirely original character who, yes, is shunned by society and is different than the other Graces who are they're humans who have Fey blood. So at some point in the past, there was a war between the Vila, which is what Alice is, and the Light Fae. And so the Light Fae and the Vila were at war, and the humans came and they helped out the Fae. And in return for this, the High Fae said, we are going to give, like, they allowed the humans to have, like, one thing they could ask for, and they asked for like the fairy magic, because the fairy magic can do a lot of good shit. And because, you know, the fays are tricksters, they said okay. And so sometimes two people have, like, you know, two regular humans, they give birth to a human who has golden blood. And if you have the gold blood, that means that you are a grace and you have like a fraction of what the fae can do. And so the graces are held in high regard. There's, you know, lots of rules governing what they can do, what they can't do. There's been reforms, all that kind of a thing. And they perform things for, you know, the people. Is like I said, it's a Sleeping Beauty retelling. Think of the fairy godmothers. And so people go into this, I think, expecting Alice to be Maleficent, and that's just simply not who she is. It's just not. I'm sorry, like, it's just not, like, there is a Maleficent-esque character in the book, but you have to read the whole book to get to the Maleficent character who appears. And so it's not very good. But Alice, Aurora, their love story, chef's kiss. Alice and her relationship with the Graces that she lives with, chef's kiss. Heather Walter's writing just does it for me. Like, she's just that girl. I love it. It was even better upon reread. Like I said, I gave it 5 stars this time instead of 4. So I'm very much looking forward to rereading Miss Rule. It's right here, Miss Rule. Looking forward to rereading that, but it won't be happening this month. So that's everything that I read in the month of January. There are 2 books that I didn't talk about today because they're for a secret project. I'm pretty sure I talked about them over on Patreon at some point because they got a whole overview of my secret projects for the year. So I'm sure I've talked to them about it at some point. Would be unsurprised if I didn't. But I did also read 2 other books that I'm not going to talk about today, but I will talk about at some point in a vlog that you'll see. I just have to edit it. So that's everything I read. Let me know down below what your favorite book that you read in the month of January was, or your least favorite, whichever you feel more passionate about. My favorite book was obviously Yellowface, and my least favorite was Night Crawling, but it's okay. February is already off to a much better start. I haven't had a hard miss yet, so I love that for me. But I will see you guys again soon in another video. But until then, and until next time.